Joining me now, I get to talk to him every year, CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, Dan Loepp. Dan, it's good to see you.
Christy, good to see you.
You know what? I always like to get people's opinion of where you think Michigan is every year when we're up here on Mackinac. We've been through some years, but how would you describe, I guess, the state of business and really the mood of where people think the state is headed?
The economy is strong, which is great, and we see it. Uh, we insure one out of every two Michiganians, so you see it in the economy, and that we continue to grow, which means the economy is continuing to grow. But I'm excited about it. I think back to in the old days, I was in the political process in Lansing, and to watch what happened with auto insurance reform in the last week is pretty awesome. Where you had leaders on both sides, both the governor and Leader Shirkey and Speaker Chatfield. It was not perfect, and they would, I'm sure, would tell you that, except that they knew that they needed to do something and it needed to get fixed. And they all sort of accepted 80% of the pizza, so to speak. And I think that's great for us. It's great for Detroit, there's no doubt.
I think it was great to see because I think a lot of people don't have faith that things can get done in Lansing. And we've seen how polarized things have been. We
Right.
see how it is in Washington right now. So to come out of the gate in what the expectation was or maybe was not, and have some kind of deal that's going to be signed up here today is really good to see. Then the next question to you would be, all right, how does this new legislation change the insurance industry, change
Right.
things for people when they're taking into consideration insurance?
For us, generally, 80% of we're first coverage on the people that we cover. So it's going to have very little impact on rates, our rates, in
Okay.
the sense of what that's going to cost. And I think generally it gives options to people in protecting people. I mean, one of the things that was important is the deal that they cut is the level 1 trauma centers, the places like the University of Michigan, like Henry Ford Hospital. You go through it. There's a half a dozen of them around the state. That it's very expensive to run a level 1 trauma center,
Right.
and so we had to recognize that, and I think the legislation did. So I think, did a really good job of trying to take all the issues, but dealing with the fact that our insurance rates were too high in Michigan, auto insurance, when you compare to anything around the country.
Yeah.
And so I think that the compromise is not a bad thing, and that's what I think sometimes gets missed. Compromise means that everybody looked at the situation and was willing to give, because there's always different point of view, and clearly on this issue there is.
Well, I think getting away from winners and losers, and winning always is good and losing always is bad. I think getting away from that black and white is what we're going to be able to. Is what we need to get issues to move forward, because now we're looking
Right.
at infrastructure. Now we're at
Right.
roads.
There's
and
plenty
some
to
kind
go.
of, yeah, there's plenty to go. And especially in some really big things. If you then all of a sudden you take into consideration education and the different prongs that are going to go with that.
Right.
And the hard decisions that I think that have to be made. So I think it is encouraging to see.
And you think back, I go back to, and certainly their politics are different. This governor, and when I was back in the game, inside, Governor Engler, he was, for somebody that I didn't agree with a lot of things that the governor did, but he knew that he had a job to do and you had to get things done. And I think this governor's looked at that as I'm not going to speak for her, but as a role model in the sense of not what your politics are, but on the fact that you have an obligation to Michigan voters to get stuff done. And I really applaud not only her, but the leadership in the legislature to do that.
All right, let's talk a little bit about healthcare. We see the stories about prescription drug prices and people concerns about coverage of pre-existing conditions. What can you say about the recent healthcare debates and the concerns that people have about prescription medication and how much it is costing right
Yeah,
now?
it's a real issue. It's funny, Christy, that as you look back and go back into the 60s, when we were covering, we've been in business 80 years. This is our 80th anniversary as
Yes.
a company. But back in the 60s, the late 60s, nobody had prescription drug coverage because it was not part of the game so much. And now prescription drug coverage is a third of the cost of healthcare. And so it's a humongous issue. And, I think we keep pushing the drug companies, and I don't want to bang on them, but the truth of the matter is, when you look at, for example, on insulin and where the prices have gone, it's ridiculous. And the truth of the matter is, if the industry doesn't self-regulate itself, government's going to regulate them. I mean,
Okay.
because it's coming. When you talk to any of the members of Congress, the Michigan delegation, what's the first issue they talk to me about is, what about prescription drugs? And so if it doesn't get regulated, self-regulated, somebody's going to regulate it.
I mean, and what are the odds that there's going to be self-regulation to a point that there's not going to need some kind of intervention?
Sort of the take is, are you willing to make good money, or are there going to be price fixes? And that might be the case. And if I'm in a regulated industry, which we are, you ought to be cognizant of that, and it'll be interesting to see. But it doesn't matter whether you talk to a Republican or a Democrat; they are all burned up about the cost of pharmaceuticals.
Even before people need prescription drugs, do you feel that we are starting to get more of a before we get sick mentality, that people are starting to be cognizant of their care, of their health before anything happens, instead of waiting until you get sick and then you need some kind of massive intervention? Are we starting to concentrate on a little bit of
I think
wellness?
probably the best thing that's happened, and I would encourage, if you ask me, okay, what's the one thing you can do about your health to be better? Have a primary care doc. Because if you think about it, and I've done this forever, my wife's done it forever, if you go for a regular checkup once a year, generally, not all the time, but generally, you're going to be protected, because they catch stuff, whether it's high blood pressure, whether it's cholesterol, if you're doing your blood test before you go in. You've got somebody that's quarterbacking your health care. We have the largest amount of patient-centered medical homes in America, in Michigan. And the fact that you can go see your primary care doc and you could talk about your health even once a year, is a huge deal, and it really does make a difference.
Let's talk a little bit about the 80th anniversary of Blue Cross Blue Shield, and kind of the milestone of that, and how you kind of characterize in terms of what the business has meant to Michigan, and what business has meant really also to the resurgence of Detroit in a lot of ways.
It is. It's I think the only place that's older than I am now. But so that's. But it really, the Blues started with doctors and hospitals looking at the idea of prepaid healthcare. I mean, that's what happened in the 30s. And I think we give a peace of mind that that rarely you have. And you talk, especially, and we're both from Southeast Michigan. When you talk to people from the auto industry, they've had their Blue Cross card from, when they were kids of their mom and dad that worked in the auto industry, and now their parents and grandparents. It's that confidence that people have, and it's a big obligation that we feel of making sure people have that comfortability about, if you get sick or something happens, you're covered.
I can't let you go without talking a little bit of politics. When you see a lot of now the Democratic candidates for president coming through and saying, we'll change healthcare, Medicare for all, single-payer system. What do you think when you hear those?
It makes me nervous. I think generally, when you think about Medicare for all, well, the theory obviously, makes sense. What it really means is probably a huge economic issue. But I think more than that, people really like their private health insurance. Now, having said that, I believe the ACA should be expanded, and that everybody has a right to health care. Having the government run it, I'm not so sure, and it concerns me. And I think, I don't think people are clamoring for that. I think what they're clamoring for is, for example, the expansion of Medicaid here in Michigan. It's been a big deal and really, really good. And we should look at those type of things. But, to take people's private health care away, I'm not so sure.
All right. Well, Dan, enjoy the rest of the conference. Is there any single conversation that you're looking forward to getting into with someone?
No, I don't. I just enjoy being up here. I chaired the conference in 2007, if I remember correctly. And this is a great place because nobody has keys to any car.
That's right.
And so
they
that
can't
puts
escape.
You can't escape, and it puts people to make people talk to each other, which I think is really important because if you converse and you communicate, generally you get more things done.
All right. Well, it's always good to see you.
Great to see you,
Okay.
Christy.